Hello. Here are the books I read in 2022. First, the raw data. I read 48 novels, and I read 9 short story collections, and I read 31 collections of poetry, and I read 28 plays, and I read 9 graphic novels, and I read 19 of what I'm calling nonfiction, which includes things like philosophy and books about true things that have happened, for a total of 144 books. It is the most I have ever read in my entire life, although the numbers were inflated by the amount of plays, novellas, and poetry collections I read. For example, I read the collected novellas of Stefan Zweig, which included 5 novellas, so I counted that as 5 separate books, although by the look of things you could say I only read 1 book. So perhaps that is duplicitous of me. Thank you. Let us begin. In January, I read 3 Dreams by John Paul and Lawrence Stern, and it was good. I read The Golden Notebook by Doris Lessing, which I abandoned at 173 pages, and it was good. I read The Flick by Annie Baker, and it was good. I also read A 9-Year-Old Aviator by Raul Ruiz, and it was just okay. I read The Broken Pitcher by Heinrich von Kleist, and it was good. And I read The Falling Sickness by Russell Edson, and it was just okay. I read Professor Anderson's Night by Dag Solstad, and it was good. And I read The Aliens by Annie Baker, and it was just okay. I also read I Feel Yes by Nick Sturm, and it was good. In February, I read A Party for Boris by Thomas Bernhard, and it was good. I read The Castle by Franz Kafka, which I abandoned at 112 pages. I stopped reading it because Beckett said he stopped reading it, for he felt too much at home. I read Ritter Denne Voss by Thomas Bernhard, which was just okay. And I read Men Without Women by Haruki Murakami, and it was just okay. And Histrionics by Thomas Bernhard, which was also just okay. I read Flowchart by John Ashbery, which was good. And I read Madness by Gabriel Ojeda Saye, or rather, I reread it, and it was good. And I read Battles in the Desert, or rather, I reread it, by Jose Emilio Pacheco, and it was good. And I read Norwood by Charles Portis, and it was good too. And I also read Small Moods by Shane Kowalski, and that was good. And I reread Far Away by Carol Churchill, and that was good. It's my favorite Carol Churchill play. And I read The Wall Creeper by Nell Zink, which I abandoned at page 55, and as you could expect, I thought it was just okay. And I read The Book of Embraces by Eduardo Galeano, and I abandoned that at 102 pages, and I also thought it was just okay. And I read First Love by Gwendolyn Riley, and that was good. And Maria Vutz by John Paul, and that was also good. And Rome by Dorothea Lasky, which was just okay. And Old Times by Harold Pinter, which was also just okay. And No Man's Land by Harold Pinter, which I reread and for the second time thought was just okay. After that, I read Jesus' Son by Dennis Johnson, and it turns out it's good. I read Loser by Joseph Kaplan, and it was good. I read Fra Keeler by Azarine van der Velde Olumi, and I thought it was just okay. I read Livermush by Graham Irvin, and it was good. And I read Wild Milk by Sabrina Ora Mark, which I abandoned at page 62, and I thought it was just okay. And I read Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead by Tom Stoppard, which was good. And I read Dog Day Economy by Ted Rees, and that was good. And I also read Versed by Ray Armentrout, and that was good. And Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee, and that was good. And I read The Skriker by Carol Churchill, which, to be honest, I don't remember at all, so I just have to say it's just okay. I read The Employees by Olga Ravin, and that was also just okay. I read No One Writes to the Colonel by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and that was just okay. And Mad Forest by Carol Churchill, which was good. And Freely Espousing by James Schuyler, and that was good. And Top Girls by Carol Churchill, and that was good. And Cloud 9 by Carol Churchill, which I also forget, so it's just okay. And I read Adventures in Immediate Irreality by Max Blecker, which was good. And I read all those famous plays by Anton Chekhov, and guess what? They were all good. And I read Normal Distance by Elisa Gabbard, and it was good. And I read Hymn to Life by James Schuyler, and it was good. And I guess I read a lot in April. I read Ray by Barry Hannah, and I thought it was just okay. And Thanksgiving by Ted Reeves, which was good. And Circle Mirror Transformation by Annie Baker, which was good. And Survey Says by Nathan Austin, which was good. And The Morning of the Poem by James Schuyler, which was good. And Train Ride by Ted Berrigan, which, to my dismay, was just okay. And Nude by Naeem Murr, which was just okay. And The Prince of Hamburg by Heinrich von Kleist, which was also just okay. And Danton's Death by George Buchner, which was good. And Wojciech by George Buchner, which was good. And Velvet Waters by Gerald Renane, that was good. In May, I read Ode, Salute to the New York School by Peter Gizzi, and that was good. And I read Little Rabbit by Alyssa Songsiradej, and that was good. And Shyness and Dignity by Dag Solstad, which was good. I also read The Unconsoled by Kazuo Ishiguro, which was my favorite book I read this year, and is therefore good. And I reread Work by Brandon Brown, which is good. And Emerald Blue by Gerald Renane, which was good. And Refuse to Be Done by Matt Bell, which was also good. In June, I read a book by Derek McCormick, which was good. And I read 3 novels by Marie Redonnet, which at the time of reading I thought was just okay, but right now I stand before the archive of my memory and they've been transformed into good. And I read Paradise by Fernanda Melchor, I don't know. Anyway, it was just okay. And Paris Spleen by Charles Baudelaire, which was good. Of course, I read Selected. Oh no, I cracked. I read Selected Declarations of Dependence by Harry Matthews, and it was whatever. It was just okay. And I read Man in the Holocene by Max Frisch, which was just okay, and Philosophy as a Way of Life by Pierre Hadot, which was good. I read Happening by Annie Ernaux, which was good. I read Toward the Phenomenology of Written Art by Gerald Burns, which is just okay. June is making me laugh, I guess. It's a funny month now. I read The Girls of Slender Means, which was it was good. And Nude by Ed Portugal, which was just okay. In July, I read My Brother's Husband by Gengoro Tagame, which was good. And I read The Treasure Chest by Johann Peter Halbil, which was good. And Chappie by Anna Haifisch, which was good. And Old Goriot by Honoré de Balzac, which I abandoned at page 80, and it was good. I just didn't like the translation. I'll read it again. I read William Softkey and the Purple Spider by C.F., which was it was just okay. I read Autoportrait by Jesse Ball, which was good, and The Artist by Anna Haifisch, which was good. And I also read, if you can believe it, I read Le Plus Belle Plage du Nord by Lucas Burton, and that was good. And The Twilight World by Werner Herzog, and that was just okay. And 99 Ways to Tell a Story by 99 Ways to Tell a Story, Exercises in Style by Matt Madden, which is modeled off the Raymond Queneau book. And so, of course, for that reason alone, it's good. But for other reasons, too, it's good, which I won't go into. In August, I read Suspended Sentences by Patrick Modiano, probably the 9th or 10th Patrick Modiano book I read, and the worst one, and therefore it is just okay. I read The Book of Mutter by Kate Zambrino, and that was good, and 100 Poems from the Japanese by Kenneth Rexroth, and that was good. And Meskin and Umezo by Austin English, and that was good. And Journey by Moonlight by Antal Serb, which was probably my second favorite book I read this year, and therefore good. I read Night Thoughts by Wallace Shawn, the actor. It was good. And I read The White Stones by Jeremy Prinn, and that was good. And I read, in September, I read Yesterday by Juan Amar, and that was just okay, unfortunately. And I read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius for a class I was teaching, and that was, to be honest, just okay. and Doleful Hoo-Ha by Mark Francis Johnson, which was good, and My Phantoms by Gwendolyn Riley, which was also good. And I read various chapbooks by Jeremy Prynne, which I'm counting as one book, and they were all good. And Spurious by Lars Eier, which was good, and All Souls by Javier Marias, rest in peace, which was good, and Dogma by Lars Eier, which was good, and Brass by Jeremy Prynne, which was also good, and Letters on Cezanne by Rainer Maria Rilke, which, to be honest, just okay. In October, I read Woman with Hat by Lucy K. Shaw, which is forthcoming, and it was good. You should buy it. And Simple Passion by Annie Ernaux, which was good. And I reread Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett, which was, of course, good. And I read An Artist of the Floating World by Kazuo Ishiguro, and it was good. And I read 75 pages of My Struggle, Book 2 by Karl Ove Knausgaard, and it was just okay. And I read Getting Lost by Annie Ernaux, and I abandoned it at page 92, and for that reason, it was just okay. And for a class I was teaching, I had to read and teach The Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan. It was good. And The Method by Isaac Butler, which was good. I learned a lot. And Exodus by Lars Eier, which was good. In November, I read Blown Study by Mark Francis Johnson, which of course was good. And I also read Defense of the Idol by Omar Cáceres, which was good. And I read Civilization and Its Discontents. I might have reread it. I think it was the first time. I don't remember, but it's by Sigmund Freud. He's a famous person in history, and it was good. And I also read Your Country is Great by Ara Shirinian, and it was good. And Lapvona by Otessa Moshfegh, and it was just okay. And I read A Number by Carol Churchill, and that was also just okay. And I read Quartz Hearts by Clark Coolidge, and it was good. And Ing by Clark Coolidge, and that was good. And I read Zeno's Conscience by Italo Svevo, which I abandoned at page 197, and it was good. Sometimes it's not the right time. And I also read The Humans by Stephen Karam, which was just okay. And Burning Secret by Stefan Zweig, which was good. And I Hope You Enjoy the Food by Zach Smith, which was good. And A Chess Story by Stefan Zweig, which was good. And The Table by Francis Ponge, which was just okay. And Own Face by Clark Coolidge, and that was good. And in December, which is the final month of the year, and the month in which I'm currently recording this, I read Ellis Island by George Perec, and it was good. And I read Fear by Stefan Zweig, and it was good. And Confusion by Stefan Zweig, and it was good. And Journey into the Past by Stefan Zweig, and that was also good. He was onto something, I guess. Sleep, Death's Brother by Jesse Ball was good. John by Annie Baker was also good. And I reread Crapp's Last Tape by Samuel Beckett, which is my favorite Beckett play, and it was good. And I read Super Mutant Academy by Gillian Tamaki, and that was good. And I read The Madness of the Day by Maurice Blanchot, which was just okay. It made me realize I've never enjoyed anything that Blanchot has written. And I'm currently reading these last two, Uncertain Manifesto by Frederick Pajak, I don't know, it's good. And for the third year in a row, I tried to finish my year by reading a book by Thomas Bernhard that I haven't read yet. This time it's Concrete. Last year it was Old Masters, which is probably my favorite Bernhard book. And the year before that is Woodcutters, which was probably my second favorite. Anyway, Concrete is good. Why did I read so much? Because you have to do something. Thank you once more. Goodbye.